You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/ARTS. Just go to Indeed.com/ARTS right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
Ooh, a spicy question. I
because
love
the
it.
writing is sort of everything, right? Like you kind of can fix plot holes, but if the writing isn't
So some
there,
readers love that, and some readers are like, "But I wanted more of this." So it's kind of a gamble.
Hello and welcome back to the Right and Wrong podcast. On today's episode, I am joined by literary agent Jade Kavanagh. Hello.
Hi, Jamie. Happy to be here.
Thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Let's jump straight in. Talk a bit about you. Am I right in thinking it was last summer that you and Rebecca Finch were promoted from junior agents to grown-up agents, I guess?
All grown-up agents, that's it, yeah.
Yeah.
I think officially, it was around the spring, and then I think it all happened in August. We announced it. We've done our little bookseller announcement where they we had a couple photo taken. I'm not sure if you've seen it.
I've seen it.
It's a really gorgeous picture of me and Becca, like we're married.
Yep.
Which is really nice.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that all happened then.
So, I mean, shout out to Rebecca who came on the podcast a while back. Episode 153, I think, if anyone's listening and wants to go back and hear more from Rebecca. But back onto you. So you've been at Darley Anderson since 2020.
Yep.
How did you first, what was your first kind of foot in the door with publishing? And then what was your kind of path to that eventually led you to Darley Anderson and where you are now?
So I came out of uni, I got my master's, and I was like, oh, I'll just go into publishing. That'll be so easy. I love books. So easy to get into it. Very quickly realised that it's very hard to get into unless you knew someone. I think this was around 2016, 2017. So the new sort of like entries and the programs and the work experience stuff was all sort of starting, but hadn't really started yet. So it was the good old fashioned intern, work experience, unpaid, all that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I did a few placements out of my master's. I did a publishing one at Watkins Press, which was non-fic. It was actually great. And then I did a few others. I did another literary agency, and then I applied for one at Caroline Sheldon Literary Agency. She is fantastic, and she represents the children's book author Julia Donaldson, among others, saga authors, women's authors, and illustrators, and children's authors. And I'd done a placement there, and then I loved it so much, and she was looking for an assistant, so she hired me. And I worked there for about 2.5 years. And then February 2020, I applied for assistant to Camilla. And I went through the interview process, got the interview and everything, did a trial day on the Thursday, got interviewed, got the job on the Friday, and Monday was the lockdown. So I actually started this job fully remote, fully locked down.
Wow.
April 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I've just been sort of made my way as Camilla's assistant, moved up to junior agent, started handling all the big contracts, everything like that. And then, I started taking my own clients, and then fully literary agent,
That's Camilla Bolton, right?
Camilla Bolton, who's the senior agent here and now managing director of this part of the agency.
Okay. And at what point during kind of that time of you joining did you start to build your list?
Quite early on, actually. I think I took on my first author, Holly Craig, in I feel like it was December 2020, which was quite early on, but I just fell in love with the manuscripts. And I think the way things are done here, they just foster such a lovely atmosphere of, opportunity, and we can really do whatever we feel really passionate about. So I took it on and took my time with it and fell in love with the book. So yeah, that was 2020, but I've been very slow but sure and methodical with who I take on, the projects I work on.
Okay. So you weren't a junior agent then, you were still an assistant, Camilla's assistant at that point.
Yeah.
So how does because I guess officially no one is querying you. So how does it work that you end up kind of like picking up an author at that point?
So I fell in love with it in Camilla's inbox.
Right.
I fell in love with it myself, and then it wasn't quite for Camilla. There's loads of reasons why it wouldn't be for an agent, which we can get onto later. But she either didn't have the time, had something similar on her list, didn't love it the way I loved it, all these things. So I contacted Holly and said, if you'd like to work with me, I'd be very happy. And Holly very generously took a punt on me. And yeah, that's how it worked.
Did you say in the email, you will be the first author that I am representing?
Yeah.
That's
it's quite
cool.
a special thing, your first author, actually.
Yeah.
It is. And yeah, me and Holly still work together and love working together, and I hope we're working together for the rest of both of our careers.
Yeah, amazing. And then presumably after that, once I guess the sort of, I don't want to say scariest, but like it's the biggest step to take on the first author, to say to Camilla, I guess, look, I think I really want to, this could be the first person on my list. Presumably after that, like you said, it was a sort of slow but methodical building up of the list.
I mean, when Camilla hired me, the job role actually was assistant to Camilla Bolton with a view to moving to junior agent, because it was actually it's the dream role, because it starts with all the experience I already had and actually has this opportunity to build. And because the idea was that we expand this side of the agency, the sort of crime, thriller, mysteries, horror side. So that was what I was hired for. And then I just sort of took the initiative and saw if I could do it and had a go.
Yeah. And here we are.
And here we are. Just those 5 years later.
So let's talk about the list then. Your list, what sort of authors, what sort of genres do you represent?
So I represent, as I say, sort of the darker side of fiction. Me and Rebecca do a lot of these sort of things together. We do a lot of lives and panels and stuff. And we always say we're sort of the equal and opposite of each other, because she's after all the rom-coms, fluffy, romanticy, all that stuff. And I'm after the horror, suspense, thriller, So you'll probably be able to find, if your book exists in the commercial fiction space, it's probably going to exist in one of our lists.
Okay.
So, yeah, I love all things suspense, thriller, horror very much. And most recently, I am expanding into what we're calling, and what is now my favourite word, horrormance.
Yeah, I have heard this recently, yeah.
I heard it on a submission I got at the start of the year by an author I've actually now signed because I fell in love with it so much. And she put horrormance in her cover letter, and I just was like, this is the perfect genre ever. This is great.
Yeah, it's one I've been. People are trying to do the romantasy thing now with all the different genres in terms of just naming the convention for it. Some of them are sticking, some are not.
I think horrormance is officially stuck for me, and I think I've used it in every other sentence since I've been back at work. We were trying to think of something the other day where it was thriller and romance, or action romance put together. And at the moment, it's romaction or thrillermance.
I like thrillermance.
Do you?
Romaction feels like it's catching a bit on the tongue, to say it.
Yeah, it's a work in progress for sure.
Yeah, that's cool. But generally, you are darker. You're looking for the more suspense stuff, the more kind of psychological. things.
Yeah. I haven't found a police procedural yet that I really, really could see myself working on or want to. I mean, as a reader, I love them. I think the Vera books, for example, and Cleve's series are one of my favourite things to go and read, but I think it's so hard to do, and I haven't come across a submission where I absolutely fall in love with it yet. In terms of other genres, other than sort of that dark side, I'm very into book club, talking point, that sort of fiction as well.
Okay. Book club this is one of the things where sometimes in life I think I have an understanding of something, and then someone will tell me something and I'll think, maybe I actually have no idea about what that means. When you say book club, as a genre, my understanding is that it broadly means, like you just said, there's the topic at the heart, the theme is something that can be discussed as a group.
Yeah. You're right. It's so tricky to define, and sometimes I feel like we throw book club out. We all sort of know what we mean in the industry, but actually it makes no sense. Because it doesn't mean book club in the formal way where it's like you get together with your book club and talk about this, because that could be any book. But I think traditionally it would be that more talking point, theme-led. It's definitely more general fiction. I think where it can't fit into pure romance, pure suspense, it can have elements of all those things. For example, Yellowface, I would say, is a thriller edged, but it definitely sits in the book club area. Yeah. Something like Queenie, Such a Fun Age, really good actually. All those sort of more general fiction that have those big themes with them is a book club book, I think.
Okay, but it's so when you say book club, it's book club, but please bear in mind the other genres that you represent, because am I right in thinking book club can also represent like a sort of literary comedy?
Oh yeah, it definitely can. This is the thing with it. It just sort of exists. And this is why I always talk to authors about it's so hard to sort of define your book. If it doesn't sit in one of these genres, that's okay. It just say. I mean, I think the beauty of what everyone's looking for now is the mashups. We're so excited by all these mashups. So if this is a romance with elements of a thriller, but has that talking point element as well, then say all of those things.
Yeah.
I think that's the difficulty with trying to box ourselves into genre, especially now. As I say, I think I'm very excited by all the mashups.
Yeah. But so the clue here is like read, and on the website you have a list of genres here, and the clue is like look at all of the genres. That's the kind of vibe, and it's more like a vibe thing than it is a specific genre.
Yeah. And that's why we sort of put those wish lists together, because while these more general things can exist, I mean, I'd like, there's any and all mysteries, crimes and thrillers I want to see, but there's specific aspects of each of those that I'm more interested in. And in the book club space as well, there are specific things, and it does sound so specific. So for authors, it's hard because it doesn't necessarily fit into that. But the reason we say it is on the off chance that someone has written the perfect book that I want to work on, at least it's out there for people to see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's always a difficult thing to kind of narrow down which agent would be most suitable just based off like a bio on a website.
Yeah. This is why we've sort of we put together the on the website there's a submissions portal where you can pick what your book is like, and then you can see which agents are looking for that, and then we all sort of pop up, and then our wish lists are underneath, and you can see a bit more about what we're specifically looking for. So hopefully we've found a way of making it as easy as possible for authors, but I do know it's so hard.
Yeah. I have seen that on the website, and I think it's great. I did want to talk about that later on. For now, just while we were talking about horromance, it sort of feels, going into 2025, I have this sort of feeling that publishing is due its next big trend, I think.
Okay, yeah.
It feels like, I think romantasy is still doing very well, but the kind of, what I'm hearing is that it's getting a bit saturated with publishers. A lot of it has been signed, a lot of it's coming out or about to come out.
Yeah. It's like anything, isn't it? I mean, it was the trend, and readers readers absolutely love it. And what's great about romantasy and really any trend is that it was so reader led. It was so reader led. I mean, they dictated what happened, which I just love. And then editors had to respond and we had to respond. But yeah, I think you're right. I think, not to sort of go back to pandemic because we never want to talk about it, but I think what happened then is everyone sort of needed that more light, firstly the escapism, secondly that sort of like very light rom-com stuff, which is why those sort of book talky rom-coms and stuff really took off. And it was amazing. And then I think you're right. I think now we're sort of horrors on the up, becoming more mainstream. It's back in the cinemas, all these things. So I think you're right. There's an uptick towards it. I'm happy because if horrormance is the new trend, I think those stories have never been out of fashion. And if you look back and you look at like all the vampire stories over the ages, they are never not in fashion, but they are the original horrormance. I mean, Dracula is that story of a horrormance.
And we just had the new Dracula, Nosferatu, come out.
Exactly. We had Nosferatu. We've had, over the years, we've had Interview with a Vampire. We've had The Twilight. We've had even Buffy and things like that. It's always there. So I'm very excited by a bit of a resurgence.
Because horrormance could be the next big thing. It's interesting when you think of it in terms of that. It does seem like, because cozy has become so popular as well recently, and cozy crossing genres like cozy crime, cozy fantasy. It's interesting that it seems like consumers want they either want to be deeply unsettled with their horror or like psychological thrillers, or they want to be entirely 100% comfortable with their cozy stuff.
I think you're right. I think you're right, and it exists in all genres. I mean, look at sort of romantic fiction. You have the very sort of romance heavy, sex on the page, all that sort of stuff. But then you also always have those sort of cozy cottage vibe, a heroine goes to a little house in the country and she falls in love and it's completely cozy and completely without any threat or any, explicit scenes or anything. So it exists in all genres. And you have police procedurals that are like very gritty and to the point, and then you have the suspense that incorporates police procedural but actually is completely unbelievable and would never happen. And I think the cozy stuff is really interesting. I think when I saw the cozy fantasy stuff, I thought I'd really love it, but actually I realized as a reader I do need some sort of like plot threat.
What did you read? Legends and Lattes?
I think it was Legends and Lattes, to be honest. How did you know?
It was the one, right? It was the Thursday Murder Club was like the crime one, and then Legends and Lattes was the fantasy one.
I think it was, and I just felt like I love this world. Like I really, to be in the world of like these different creatures, and I think I love the idea of like being an everyday thing where you're with these creatures and you just go to the coffee shop and it's run by, but it just didn't quite work for me. But there's readers out there for everything.
What's so interesting about that is I had Travis on the podcast at the end of last year, and he was talking about the kind of, when he pitches Legends and Lattes to you, unless you knew it was fantasy, he essentially pitches it as just like about someone who used to have a violent past who decides they want to pack it all up and start a coffee shop,
which is incredible. And it's what you want. And I read it and enjoyed it. I just think it's interesting as a reader and as an agent, you sort of go around each genre and pick up what's new, and you really do get a sense of your own taste as well. And that's why it all works, because there's readers out there for everything. There's agent, and that's where it starts. And then, okay, there's an agent out there for everything, and then there's the editors that's specific. So it all works really well.
So that was what that kind of fantasy, because Travis started independently publishing, and then romantasy also these genres that like you described, because they're both, Legends Lattes was driven by readers, and then romantasy as a genre, like you say, has been totally piloted by readers, and editors have had to kind of adapt to that. Both of them work really well in the self-publishing sort of format, and a lot of people, you know, that I've spoken to on this podcast, a lot of them are either self-publishing or are started off self-publishing, have moved into traditional publishing. Do you think that is quite genre specific? Do you think something like if horror romance if horror romance picks up and that's the next big thing, do you think that also is going to fit into that kind of successful self-publishing space, or do you think that's one of those genres that kind of works better traditional?
No, I think it does work. I think all the while you've got these readers who don't put down their Kindles and go to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. I think it's incredible. And there's loads of ways to have your book published, and through an agent is just one of them. And it comes with its own pros and cons, and through a traditional publisher is one of them. And as with self-publishing, it comes with its own pros and cons. I love that writers are getting their books directly out there and readers are seeing them. It works. I think it does work across genre, because if you look at those sort of book talky romances that are just straight up romance with the tropes, you know, the enemies to lovers, friends to lovers, all those things, lots of them were self-published as well in the last couple of years and have now become more traditional published. So I do think that's the way it can go, because people are so much more aware of, firstly, as a writer, that you can do this, and secondly, as a reader, not to be put off by the fact that it doesn't come through a traditional publisher. Readers don't really care. If it's what they want to read, they're going to read it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there used to be much more of a stigma, which I think has been sort of just weathered out over time.
Yeah.
Do agents nowadays, are you guys looking at self-published authors who have like found success, and are you sort of reaching out to them?
I think I haven't done it, but I think agents are doing it. And I think the reason I haven't done it mainly is maybe to your point that it's not really happening in the genres I'm looking for.
Right.
I think we, as agents, the way I do it is I do a lot of research as a reader. And the fact is I do a lot of reading for pleasure as well as my work reading. So I'll be, you know, on BookTok and on my Kindle as much as the next reader. And if I see something that's like, what's this? Or an obvious, I think, with the market in my head, with the industry in my head, what do I want to work on next? So yeah, if you see this book that's flying and you see it everywhere, and then you look at the author and naturally I'd be like, who's she represented by? And you see that she's not, then I can imagine I would approach that person.
Because it does seem like becoming more of a established career route now is you find success in self-publishing, and then you either find an agent or an editor reaches out to you, and like that's a new kind of career path that's kind of become more popular in the last few years, I think.
Yeah, and it works. It does work. But I've also seen self-published authors turn that down, because there's as I say, there's pros and cons on both sides. And one of the pros of self-publishing is you have all the control, and you know, all of the money you make is entirely yours, and there's not these other financial systems set up. And but on the other hand, you have to do all the work yourself, and there's no team behind you, and the access you have to retailers and things like that is different. So it is definitely a route, but as I say, there are so many routes. I mean, self-published is just one of them. You have authors who were published for 3 books maybe 10 years ago, and then they were dropped, and then they come back and they work with an agent or not with an agent. So there's so many different ways of doing it. No journey to publishing is the same.
Yes, exactly. That is becomes more and more apparent the more people you speak to just in and around publishing, and like not just for authors, like for like agents like yourself, or like editors, or you know, whatever it may be. It's a very human industry, and there's no like set paths in the way.
That's the thing as well. And no matter what, I mean, we are doing business. Yes, on this side, it's my job. Agenting comes with lots of other things that aren't just reading. But ultimately, all of us, editors, agents, writers, all of us are just book lovers. And book lovers generally are very kind and happy and just want to talk about books. So it does make for quite a nice industry.
Yes. Yeah, generally. I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Before we head over to the desert island, I just wanted to ask, there's always a fun question to ask agents is, have you or would you ever want to write and perhaps publish some writing of your own?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I am not a writer. I'm not.
Okay.
I feel like when I'm brainstorming a book with an author, I have so many ideas. And I think the thing that I can bring to the table is here's what editors are looking for. Here's what I think the market's going, those things. But when it comes to actually sitting down and writing an 80,000 word manuscript, I couldn't. I always say when I do edits for a writer, if I'm doing a markup or something, I caveat everything with, I've attempted to write a line I think could go here. Please disregard it. Please rewrite it. You're the writer. I'm not, because some of them are bad.
Yeah. It's an entirely different skill to be like, oh, this I can identify where the issues are, but I do not want to offer solutions at this time.
Yeah, like I think this scene should look like this, but usually it's like my way of writing the scene is like, he says this, then she says this, and then it's like, make this better.
Yeah. Do the writing part for me. I'm just telling you, where I found an issue.
Yeah.
Okay, amazing. So absolutely not. You
Definitely
do not
not.
want to write. You
Definitely not. I mean, I don't
not
see
your
that
thing.
changing, but if in 5 years suddenly I'm a published author, then don't come for me.
We'll see.
We'll see.
So that brings us to the point where I ask you, Jade, if you were stranded on a desert island with a single book, which book do you hope that it would be?
Okay, I told myself I'm going to go like with my initial instinct on this. And it is Dracula.
Nice.
Because every single time I read that book, and it's many, many times, I'm always entertained by it and scared and all the things you want. It's nice and long. I think that's my answer.
Nice. I mean, it's a classic. It's one of those like
classic.
all-timers. It's been remade, remixed, retold a million different times in a million different ways.
I have like 5 editions of it on my bookshelf.
Wow.
So I feel like if I didn't say it, people would listen to this and be like, Jade, you've made Dracula your entire personality. How could you not pick that?
Okay. And very telling for people wanting to query you. It's like, think about that. Just think about the vampire, the Dracula stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I've had on my wish list for so long, give me sort of a modern day Dracula retelling. It's sort of like Interview with a Vampire meets American Psycho. Sort of imagine what Carlisle Cullen is doing now. I just want something like that so much, or a new take on Buffy and things like that. So I think horrormance is for me.
Yes. American Psycho crossed with something vampire sounds great. I would be there for that.
Yeah. I'll say it's like a female American Psycho figure, and she's a vampire. Obviously there's got to be more to it, and that's where the writer comes in. But that's what I want.
Oh, that's very cool. Do you keep up with all the sort of vampire iterations and things? Like, have you seen the new Nosferatu movie and stuff?
I'm actually going next week to see it with my mum.
Okay.
My mum and I both love Dracula. She's the first person who showed me Dracula and introduced me to the Gary Oldman.
Oh, yeah.
Classic. So yeah, I'm going to see that soon. Have you seen it?
I've not seen it yet. My friends have seen it and they loved it.
Yeah, I'm very excited.
I'm not so much on the horror side of things.
Oh, okay.
I'm much more of a wuss. So
no, honestly, it's really scary. The first time I read Dracula properly, I think I was about 17. I was on a train on my own, and it was dark outside, and I was reading the scene where Jonathan is on the way to Dracula's castle. And it's not even, the scary stuff hasn't even happened yet, but I had to close the book and wait till I got off the train. So that's how you know.
A lot of the time it's the actual event, the scary event is not as as terrifying as the anticipation and the build up towards it.
Exactly. It's definitely the build up.
Yeah. Awesome. Very cool choice. I like that. And I also think it's very, very useful for people trying to get a glimpse into who you are as a person and as an agent.
Yeah, it's on brand.
Exactly. Coming up, we're going to get into a bit more about querying and how you approach that, as well as looking into each part of querying and like what DA does for that kind of process. But that will all be in the extended episode available on Patreon. That brings us to the end of the episode. Thank you so much, Jade. It's been awesome.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I've loved it.
It's been so good hearing about how you got into where you are now and everything that you're working with and how you approach the job. And hopefully everyone listening will be able to get a lot of useful insights from this.
Oh, great. Well, I hope so.
And for anyone listening, if you do want to keep up with what Jade is doing, you can find her on Twitter at JadeCav_ or on Instagram at Jade_Kavanagh_agent. And if you are thinking of querying Jade or any of the agents over at Darley Anderson, head over to the website. You'll find everything you need on the submissions page. To support this podcast, like, follow, and subscribe. Join the Patreon for ad-free extended episodes and check out my other podcast, The Chosen Ones and Other Tropes. Thanks again, Jade, and thanks to everyone listening. We will catch you on the next episode.